the industry is moving is that brands will continue to invest in these direct buy environments with the Amazons and Walmarts of the world, and they'll want that exact same experience from the rest of retail. So I think there's going to be some movement, at least in terms of how the provider ecosystem brings that to a retailer.
Welcome to eCommerce Deep Dive, the show where we explore e-commerce business strategy and the future of shopping online. Your host is John Ghiorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific, a full-service agency dedicated to growing brands on Amazon. Every week, John talks shop with the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. For today's episode, we welcome back Nich Weinheimer. Nich is the GM of e-commerce at Kenshoo. He joined us for the inaugural episode of the podcast, and now returns to talk to John about the digital advertising landscape and offer a glimpse of the future of media buying. The two talk about how retailers like Amazon, Walmart, and Instacart create attractive ad products and help brands understand where they should be spending their digital ad dollars. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Nich, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, I should say.
Well, thank you for having me back. I clearly didn't annoy people too much last time, so I appreciate it.
No, it's great to have you back on. You were on our inaugural episode of eCommerce Deep Dive, where I rambled for 55 minutes, and you had great answers. So, maybe for the folks that didn't listen to our first episode, if you could just give them a quick background on you and Kenshoo, and then we'll kind of roll into it.
Well, first of all, I think we're probably both our own worst critics. So what you saw as rambling, I saw as like, wow, this guy's got a professional setup and lights and everything. This is great. I don't know. So I'd be glad to see the series go on. You've been pulling some pretty amazing talent across the industry into some really interesting conversations. So kudos for the progress. For those of you who, I don't know, I'm sure there's lots of you. My name is Nich Weinheimer. I'm the GM of e-commerce at Kenshoo. Kenshoo is an enterprise advertising technology platform. We license our technology to brands and agencies to help them serve in their marketing needs on the world's leading native advertising channels. And in my case, for e-commerce, that's predominantly Amazon advertising, but expanding rapidly out into Walmart and other retailers that I'd love to dive in and talk a little bit about. But that's the short background on who we are at Kenshoo. We certainly, just maybe to add some clarity, it's a 15-year-old company that was founded in Tel Aviv, so it's an Israeli company. We're global now with over 700 folks, with business units for search like Google, Bing, social, Facebook, Instagram, etc., and then e-com, where we activate brand media dollars across leading retail media opportunities.
Awesome. That's great. So you kind of mentioned this in your intro, but really the topic that I'm super interested in, just from a kind of an e-commerce nerd perspective, is advertising that is apparently every marketplace, every retailer and their mother are all launching ad platforms this year. Walmart was kind of the big announcement, I think, from an industry perspective earlier in the year. But what's your kind of macro view on this? Is it just, if you have a .com e-commerce site or marketplace, is it just required at this point that you have an advertising platform? Is that where this is all going?
Well, you look at the pressure in, the rest of retail outside of a quote retailer like Amazon that is an e-commerce business and also a technology company. It's hard to blend the lines in terms of what they are at this point, given the vertical structure of their organization. The rest of retail, though, they're retail companies first and foremost. And sure, some of them, like Walmart, are 3 times the size of Amazon's retail business from a retail perspective. So there is still some scale power out in the rest of retail. But it's becoming a bit of an existential threat for a lot of these retailers, whether or not they have a high margin business unit like advertising, in their P&L to potentially thrive and exist. Some of these retailers, if you engage in conversations with them, some of these are 100-plus-year-old brands, literally have conversations about how long can we survive. It's not an if, it's just a when. And so what can we do to get there? And that's, obviously it has to be a very challenging conversation to have, but certainly a high margin ads business is a means to extending your life and or continuing to innovate. And you've seen different retailers take different approaches. When you kind of look at the e-commerce experience and where this digital advertising ecosystem is standing up, there aren't that many that have more than, call it like 50 million unique visitors a month, which is kind of a baseline requirement to actually having a workable ads ecosystem. Anything below that, brands aren't going to want to invest in a direct media buy with that channel. Then you start looking at the other side of the coin, which is like Google and Amazon that have half of all initial product searches. So these retailers aren't necessarily your retail search channels, though consumers do search on those sites. You start to think about what do specific retailers do well, like Target does, their own customer loyalty programs very well. They are better in certain categories than other retailers. And so you start to see these folks apply their strategies around their customer loyalty programs, around the traffic that they are acquiring from partners like Google, and even starting to think in unique and interesting ways about, hey, how much ad revenue can I sell on a product detail page? Compare that to my customer acquisition cost on Google. And then maybe I actually can increase my customer acquisition cost because I can offset it with these marginal dollars, and therefore I'm competing a little bit more for, on that front. So I can ramble on about this because I do a lot of thinking and working with these types of partners, but you can kind of separate them into two groups, and then I'll pause. One group is those larger retailers that are building their own ads ecosystem. They can stand up their own sales force, a la Walmart Media Group. Even Wayfair is actually building their own versus finding a partner out there. And then you've got the other retailers who are saying, hey, I need to outsource that. I need to bring in a technology provider to do my ad serving and pump in, display inventory from a network. And then I need to court the demand on the search side, like from a Kenshoo. And there's a lot of interesting and exciting things happening in that ecosystem of who helps build that ads ecosystem for a retailer. And so we're heavily involved in those conversations.
Hey there, I'm Dave Zimmerman with Orca Pacific. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to let you know this episode is brought to you by Orca Pacific, a Mighty Hive company. We're a full-service agency exclusively focused on Amazon with capabilities for everything a brand needs to succeed on the platform. From advertising strategy, content development and SEO, to merchandising and marketing. If it relates to driving and converting demand on the platform, our dedicated teams are leaders in this space. Our robust suite of services includes expertise on the back end as well, from operational support, demand forecasting and planning, to the right fulfillment options, and higher level strategies like long-term planning, channel management, and access to beta programs. To learn more, visit our website at www.orcapac.com. That's ORCAPAC.com. And a business development manager will get you up to speed on how we can accelerate your Amazon business. Now, back to the show.
Why do this at all? And I understand certainly the kind of the revenue model, but most of these sites already had some element of paid merchandising. I mean, you could already go to Target.com or Walmart.com 4 or 5 years ago and say, hey, I want to spend co-op dollars. I want to pay for some more, merchandising, if you want to call it that, marketing maybe on the site. Why move to more of a bid-based self-service model? Is it just because ultimately you can kind of just capture more dollars that way? Is it more efficient? I mean, maybe these are obvious answers, but what's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, have a sales organization thinking about media. I mean, yeah, I'm sure they have a couple folks whose job it is to carve out, the co-op riders that are in the supplier agreements and put together merchandising solutions that keep the brands happy, when in reality, the retailer is looking at that co-op as just their margin on their relationship with the supplier. So the difference being, right, like if you're relegated to a few percentage points in co-op dollars that get pushed into your ecosystem, that's just a marginal negotiation. It's not a media business.
It's not actually adding value to the brand. It's more of a thing they're forced to do versus want to do.
Yeah, it may add it sure does add value to in a small way, but your point on, on scale, like if you don't have a sales team out there trying to go capture, budget, selling an opportunity that has scale and something you can control or pull levers against, it's not going to become a meaningful part of your business. Again, co-op dollars in most cases, and if you look at Amazon as one of the primary cases, it's just a marginal negotiation tactic. You say you're going to do something with it, but you really don't generally have to report back to the brand exactly what happened with that. What Amazon did that was the most kind of brazen thing was say, yep, we're still going to have co-op riders in our agreements, but here are a bunch of tools, brands, where you can go compete against each other in our ecosystem and, knock the cans out of each other. And they've proven they will, and they'll go deep into their pockets. And Amazon's then going, okay, now I can go capture brand advertising dollars in this whole vertical ecosystem I've built. The other retailers are saying, you know what, maybe we need that ecosystem as well, largely because those brands are also asking for it. They're like, why am I always in 10th position behind competitor A, B, or C? I want to be able to control that. I don't want to have to go talk to my, and get the buy and like see if I can get the, the unit at the top of the category. Like, no, I should be able to, if I want to carve budget out from wherever I have it, outside of my trade spend, outside of the, the riders on our agreement that, between myself and the retailer, I should be able to do that. I should be able to go get those brand dollars and start activating, buying display media, buying the search on the site, and controlling my destiny. And I think that's the biggest theme that we're seeing, is that like transparency and control is what these brands want.
Yeah. And in that transparency and control creates an incremental level of spend beyond just your sort of co-op or your merchandising. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. So you talked about kind of these two ways of approaching it, this sort of the owned way, Amazon, now Walmart, and then the sort of outsourced way of building it. Who is that? Who's doing that today that you're interested in?
Well, it's not a new concept, to your point about like you've seen sponsored ad units on retail sites for a long time. The model that originally brought that to the fore is more of an ad network model, a blind model, where and Criteo is probably the first company to see that opportunity in their acquisition of HookLogic, who really kind of wrote the book on that. HookLogic now is the underpinning technology for the kind of product advertising on retail sites that Criteo has. And Criteo originally on that technology built out basically a media exchange across different retail partners. So if you were a brand, you invested, $1 million a month with Criteo, and then they would report back and say, here's how many clicks you got and how many sales you got. They wouldn't tell you which retailer that came from. You couldn't optimize and move it between. Like,
it's ultimately just inventory. It's
a product advertising network buy that has additional value, and it's sold within that retail ecosystem. So it was a smart play. Then you bring the concept of transparency and control into the picture. You think about how advertisers have been trained to be able to move budgets around dynamically and look at opportunities even within the Amazon ecosystem. So now we kind of have, you see Criteo starting to respond to that. They're launching their retail media platform, which is more of a transparent control. Brands can buy directly to a retailer who decides that Criteo will be their partner for that platform. And then, from there, there's some more nuances in terms of how ad tech companies tend to play in this space that's a little bit different from what it's like to buy directly from a publisher, where you may have to pay a DSP fee to the supply provider. That supply provider is also probably working with the retailer on some economic terms as well. And the brands have to figure out that nuance, because they're also probably working with providers like Kenshoo and our ilk that seek to help do all of their retail media activation at scale, because it's complex across all these partners. There's lots of different nuances. And then there are other players. Criteo is a good example. They were kind of wrote the book, but you see Microsoft acquiring Promote IQ last year. Promote IQ most notably powers the on-site advertising for Kroger, and similar model in that they have a UI like you would experience on Amazon advertising. They have, and they underpin the serving of the ads on on the retail site. And then brands come, spend on Kroger's properties through that. Now, again, I think where the industry is moving is that brands will continue to invest in these direct buy environments with the Amazons and Walmarts of the world, and they'll want that exact same experience from the rest of retail. So I think there's going to be some movement, at least in terms of how the provider ecosystem brings that to a retailer, and how ultimately a retailer demands like how their ads business is structured. How that's set up, because
So in those examples, and I'm approach everything from the Amazon lens. I can't help it. But is it more comparable? Is it search based? Is it display based? Is it something else? Is it just you're just buying a certain amount of impressions? Like how with these kind of third party oriented networks on these other commerce channels, retailers, marketplaces, how are you actually like targeting these ads? How does it look and feel for somebody that's maybe familiar with Amazon advertising? Like how do you compare it?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I already brought up kind of the traffic issue, where for an Amazon brand, the majority of their spend is still in their performance kind of search products, because of just the volume of traffic and searches that Amazon gets. They are a search engine. Another retailer, though, it's probably the exact flip of it. It's going to be predominantly display media, on-site, commerce display ad units that are IAB standard, so they can be kind of right rail, or they're not necessarily in the grid as a search result, and potentially across different types of pages in the retailer's ecosystem. And then within sort of the kind of the sort of ecosystem of display media, you have, of course, all the data providers that can help you target, and you can target your own. So It's not like Amazon, right, who has all that amazing first-party data and they packaged it up perfectly. I'm not 100% up to speed. I deal more on the performance side of things, but I'm relatively certain that some of these providers have definitely worked with their retailers to help, infuse some of the custom segments that those retailers themselves know about their own users, and then can give those segments up as targeting opportunities as well. So it's not too dissimilar, but usually I think what you'd see is the inventory type is flipped. It's going to be more awareness based than performance.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you're a CMO at a CPG company and you're thinking about advertising within sort of commerce, maybe top 5, how are you prioritizing right now channels, not just based on volume, but maybe based on like opportunity, up and coming, how important is it over the next 3 years? I assume Amazon is number 1, but maybe not. Like, how do you think about that?
It is today. I mean, none of these retailers, Walmart included, is going to catch up overnight to the ads business that Amazon's built, nor will they get the rich customer data at the fingertips that has taken, at the fingertips that Amazon advertising has, that has taken them, what are we now, 12 years since Amazon launched their ads business in 2008. They're just not going to be able to catch up that quickly. They know what they need to do. And in some cases, they know they have even a bigger opportunity to influence top line sales across, like I pointed out with Walmart and Amazon's 3 times bigger from a retail perspective than Amazon's retail business. So right now, Amazon's first, but in 3 years, does Walmart's ability to tie together the influence of digital advertising on your offline sales start to bring Walmart up to parity, at least from a performance perspective?
Volume's there, right? If you're ultimately impacting volume, so per dollar of volume, it's X amount more important. So it sounds like then Walmart's probably number 2 on your list right now.
Yeah, just by size and scope and their ability to invest in the ecosystem, I think they'll be second. And of course, it depends on the type of brand as well. Are you more digitally native? Are you deep into the Walmart experience where that's the most important retailer for you? Then you're probably going to have a different perspective than that brand who hasn't even broken into Walmart physical stores yet, but is enormous on Amazon and all the other .com properties. Maybe they're more interested in Target's private marketplace for the type of brand that they are. And they're still a significantly sized brand, but I would say it probably goes Amazon, Walmart, Kroger, and Instacart, like these kind of bigger grocery providers, especially if we're talking big CPG. Now, if you're a consumer electronics company, that's going to look different. It's Walmart, then it's Amazon, then maybe it's Best Buy, and then it's Walmart. In terms of like sell more TVs through Best Buy than I do through. In fact, Amazon's just more of an advertising channel for me. If you really looked at the volume of how many TVs get sold through Best Buy.
Yeah, and a lot more than Kroger. So that makes sense. Instacart's an interesting one. Can you talk a little bit more about that specifically? What are they doing? I've heard, just sort of through the grapevine stuff, because we don't work with them directly, but just like there's been some pretty impressive ROIs kind of out of the gate. What's your headline on Instacart advertising?
Look, if I had unicorn blood in my car over here, we'd be going a million miles an hour as well. And they're the unicorn, right? In this space, they've created, mass appeal across a model that's, enormous right now in terms of the gig economy mixed with the, on-demand delivery, mixed with a huge amount of CPG demand in grocery inventory that Walmart hasn't officially released yet into their API ecosystem, though they have obviously a huge grocery opportunity. Kroger, the scale isn't there, and nor is the last mile delivery a solution that Instacart has.
So if you're a grocery brand, you can't advertise through Walmart.
No, you certainly can advertise through Walmart. It's just access to the grocery inventory. So right now, like the grocery and the .com are separated. Yeah, and you can get some advertising on it, but Walmart has to manage it for you. So it's not a go back to transparency and control for players like us. It's not yet in the ecosystem yet. Huge opportunity for them. Don't get me wrong, but I think even an Instacart, regardless of those specific walled gardens, could play across those because of their last mile delivery and the fact that if that consumer is on the Instacart, it's a lot like what we talk about with brands about the Amazon opportunity, 4 or 5 years ago. It's like your consumers are there. Like as much as you want to compete with them or whatever it is, it's like you need to play there and figure out how to grok it. And so that's why I think Instacart's going to be that, it's that nuanced unicorn that has aggregated more grocery inventory than any one channel ever could. And even stuff like Fry's Electronics. So it's not just grocery. It's like you could be a CPG company that just wants to limit your focus to those Instacart shoppers that I want you to go buy me that, whatever boombox at Fry's.
Well, because Instacart could really become the thing that we all thought Google may be able to pull off 5 years ago when they tried to get into commerce and then said never mind, and then tried it again and tried something different, which is to be kind of go one layer above the retailer and be the platform or the mall or the connective, whatever you want to call it, the entry point to all of retail. It's possible that Instacart could pull that off, right? Like that's a real possibility at this point. So
yeah, if Google, you think of what the breadth of what they do across their innovation labs and things like that. They've had, such a focus on supporting retail directly, retailer by retailer, that I think really nailing that kind of cross retailer approach was going to be fundamentally challenging, especially given the fact that they didn't have that secret ingredient, which was the gig economy play on the last mile delivery, that enables that ecosystem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Super interesting. So are there any other from an advertising kind of in the commerce world perspective, are there any other platforms, marketplaces, anything that you just find kind of like interesting at this point, even if they're more niche players, or is it pretty much the list of, top 5 retailers are kind of the top 5 probably most important advertising platforms at this point?
Yeah, I think they are. There's a certain amount of just like volume that dictates the opportunity. You're going to go where the eyeballs are. It's where you're going to advertise, and you're going to prioritize where the revenue is in your business. I think there's a ton of opportunity to innovate in this space right now. It's, I certainly have my thinking cap on. We're a global organization. We serve this ecosystem. We haven't in the past served in the way that these other providers have served, but we may be a bigger player in it. I don't think we're necessarily going to go and, completely rethink our business model. But globally, retail is still one of the largest advertising buckets of just global digital ad dollars. So there, I think, is especially a ton of opportunity to innovate, like the connective tissue between the different types of digital investments that you're doing. And we see it just if we take the retailer ecosystem as an example, whether it's co-op dollars that, brands want the retailer to activate on traditional digital channels to drive more traffic into their product detail pages, alongside obviously the retail media on site that they can invest in. What happens when you start to that point about the retailer, the revenue they get from their site monetization and what their customer acquisition costs can be on Google? That's something that no one's really doing right now. And we're starting to work with our retail partners on where we have both their supply side and their demand side support. So I think there could be more and more where like these retail ecosystems of stand-up ads businesses start to say, here, brand, not only is this a suite of tools to invest in our own on-site media, which, as we pointed out, is not the same makeup as Amazon's, but here's some tools to just quickly launch some campaigns to drive traffic in from other interesting digital channels into an effect and influence and take control of your own user acquisition on our site. And that's not something really anyone's thinking about. If it's being wielded, it's a co-op program that the retailer is running and saying, hey, brand, I used your co-op dollars. I drove social traffic in. Here's the performance. If they even share the performance, they just say, this is what we did with your money. Giving that control to these brands. These brands are proving through Amazon and through their demands in the market that they want to have better control over their own destinies inside their retail partners.
Yeah. Makes sense. I assume I know the answer to this one, but have you seen any of these omni-channel retailers stand up inventory in their physical stores, add inventory yet? I mean, can you going through Walmart's media division, can you also run programmatic media through, I don't know, screens in a Walmart? I haven't been in a Walmart in a while.
I've heard that that's the plan. I've heard the always in, always on tagline from the Walmart teams, that's the intention. You as a brand, you want to communicate to your customer everywhere through their nonlinear customer journey, through all of what you provide to them. And that could be in their shopping cart, in their grocery pickup and delivery. That could be at the pickup point where there's a screen telling you, hey, 1 minute and 20 seconds till your shopper comes out, and boom, here's that ad from P&G for that Swiffer product that you want. And then or like now they're talking about putting more and more screens on like the frozen thing where it's hard enough to see in there and see what you're buying, but like merchandise, like, hey, in this screen is that product, and I know because your phone is near to me right now that you're a brand loyalist to this. Do you want to try this? And that brand's willing to pay out the ears to get that opportunity to get you to Swift.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of technology that has to be physically in place for this stuff to be, for it to work. But I was wondering if there were any kind of test cases going on that you're aware of. It's got to be something folks are at least thinking.
That's what I'm hearing about. I personally, in Seattle, admittedly, I do Prime Now grocery delivery, because sometimes I'm on calls from 6:30 in the morning with the Tel Aviv company till 6 in the evening, and grocery stores are just not appealing to me at the end of that day. And I spent 3 months living in the rural northern Michigan, and so I went into small grocery stores in that area. So I don't have the Walmart. Like, I know there are places where Walmart is like where you go for grocery, where you go for everything. But I think they will be the ones to innovate the fastest, given the footprint that they have. But I would see Target potentially, being a fast follow, if not innovating in their own unique ways.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I mean, Amazon. We know Amazon's going to do this, right? Like that's not a question that needs to be answered. It's just a matter of when, not if, in terms of.
But their offline footprint is still so quirky.
That is, and it's also tiny.
It's the Go store. I mean, okay, look, Whole Foods, that's cool, but like Whole Foods is a certain demographic. It's a certain size business. It doesn't have the scale that, rolling out a national campaign with P&G on every place that there could be an ad shown across digital, physical, car parks, like whatever else. Sure. That's a Walmart play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the opportunity for Walmart is much, much larger. Nick, I mean, I think that's probably a good place to kind of wind down. If folks are interested in connecting with you directly, hearing more about Kenshoo and the services you offer, how do they do that?
Happy to be in touch. We have obviously a website with lots of different pieces of information about our different business units. I'm always happy to hear from folks directly. My name's Nich Weinheimer, spelled Nich. Nick.Weinheimer at Kenshoo.com. It's, if you don't want to spell my last name, you can just do Nick W at Kenshoo.com. And be happy to hear from you. And of course, smoke signals, the bat signal, whatever else. There's too many forms of communication. I'm also on that LinkedIn. So,
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah. Hey, Nick, thanks for coming back on.
Cheers, John. Always a pleasure. Appreciate it. Anytime.